Right now, without you feeling a thing, the clear window at the front of your eye is pulling oxygen straight out of the air around you, and it does it without a single blood vessel to help. Look at the very front of your eye, that smooth, curved, see-through dome. That is your cornea. It is the clear glass the whole world has to pass through before you can see any of it. And at this very moment, it is quietly drinking oxygen from the air in the room. No effort, no sound, just a slow, patient sip that never stops. Now here is the strange part. Almost every living piece of you runs on blood. Your muscles, your skin, your organs, all of it is threaded through with tiny red rivers carrying oxygen. Blood is how a body normally feeds itself. But the cornea broke that rule. It is one of the only living tissues in your entire body with no blood vessels at all. None. Not a single vessel running through it. And that emptiness is not an accident. It is the whole point. Think about what a cornea has to do. Light needs a clear road to reach the back of your eye. A blood vessel sitting in that road would scatter the light and smear everything you look at. So the cornea keeps its road empty on purpose. No vessels means nothing to bump the light off course. But it goes deeper than just staying clear of traffic. Inside the cornea is a thick middle layer called the stroma, really just its main body. And that body is built from tiny ropes of a protein called collagen. Here is the beautiful part. Those ropes are not thrown in like a pile of string. They are stacked in a precise, even lattice. Think of a perfectly woven grid, laid down with almost impossible care. That exact spacing is what lets light slip straight through living tissue as if it were glass. You are, in a very real sense, looking out through a window that is alive. So the cornea stays bloodless to stay clear. But that raises an obvious problem. If it has no blood, how does it breathe? Everything alive needs oxygen. And this is where a lovely little myth needs gently correcting. People say the cornea breathes the air like a tiny lung. It does not. There is no gasp, no muscle, no in and out. Nothing is actually inhaling. What really happens is quieter. And honestly, stranger. A thin sheet of tears is spread across the front of your eye all day long. Oxygen from the air dissolves into that tear film first. It soaks into the wet layer. And then slowly, that dissolved oxygen just drifts inward, molecule by molecule, into the cornea itself. So it does not breathe the air, it breathes through its tears. Every blink you make is smoothing out a fresh, oxygen-rich layer for it to sip from. The air just outside your eye is about 1/5 oxygen. That gives the surface a healthy, steady supply while your eyes are open. And researchers found the cornea needs surprisingly little to stay well. Two scientists, Robert Mandel and Kenneth Pulse, estimated the bare minimum it needs at the surface, a fairly low bar, easily cleared by open air. So during the day, the front of your eye is comfortable. But now comes the twist most people never hear. The cornea does not have one air supply, it has two. The front layer sips oxygen from the sky, from the tears touching the open air. But the back of the cornea faces inward, toward the inside of your eye, and in there sits a clear fluid called the aqueous humor, just the watery filling behind the cornea. That fluid carries its own dissolved oxygen, so the deep back layers drink from the inside of your own eye instead of the air. Front sips from the world, back sips from within. Two supplies feeding one silent window from opposite directions. Now, how do you even know the air matters this much? For that, go back to the year 1952. Two researchers, George Smelser and Victoria Ozanix, ran a landmark study published in the journal Science. They asked a simple question: what happens if you block the cornea's air? So they covered it with early primitive contact lenses that sealed the surface off from the atmosphere, and the cornea reacted almost at once. Cut off from its oxygen, it began to swell and cloud over. The clear window fogged like breath on cold glass. That was the first strong proof that atmospheric oxygen keeps the cornea clear. Take the air away, and the window mists up. It was a quiet result, but it changed how the eye is understood. And it leads straight to a question you have never thought to ask. What happens to all of this when you fall asleep? Close your eyes, and the sky is switched off. The air is gone. The tear film is sealed under your lids. The front supply, that steady sip from the atmosphere, simply stops. So overnight, the cornea has to lean on a backup. Tucked inside your eyelids, on the soft pink lining, there are tiny blood vessels. With your eyes shut, those vessels press close and hand over what oxygen they can. But it is a thinner ration, only a fraction of the daytime supply. Roughly a third of what the open air gives. So all night, your cornea runs a little starved. And here is the gentle consequence. By morning, that mild shortage has made it swell, puff up by about 4 in every 100 parts of its thickness. You wake with a cornea slightly thicker, slightly foggier than when you drifted off. There is a quiet chemistry behind the swelling. Short on oxygen, the tissue switches to a backup way of making energy that leaves behind a little acid. That acid pulls water in, and the water is what makes it puff. It is a small, overnight bruise of the softest kind. But watch what happens when you wake. You open your eyes. The sky switches back on. Air floods the tear film again, oxygen pours back in, and the cornea begins to drain. Within about an hour of opening your eyes, the overnight fog clears, and the window turns crystal again. A tiny sunrise happening inside your eye every single morning. Fog at dawn, clear by breakfast. You never notice it, but it happens each day of your life. So far, this is a gentle story, a clever window that swells at night and clears by day. But there is a darker turn, and it is astonishing. Remember, the whole magic of the cornea is that it has no blood vessels. That emptiness is sacred. But what happens if you starve it for too long? Sleep in the wrong contact lenses, older ones that barely let oxygen through, or any lens not meant for overnight wear. Night after night, you seal the cornea off and choke its supply. And a suffocating cornea does something almost forbidden. It begins to grow its own blood vessels. Desperate for oxygen, the deprived tissue sends out a chemical distress call. And in response, tiny vessels start creeping in from the rim around the cornea, inch by inch, into the space that is supposed to stay empty. Think about the tragedy of that. The very emptiness that kept the window clear is being invaded by the body trying to save it. To breathe, it clouds the exact clarity the emptiness was protecting. In fact, wearing contact lenses is the leading cause of this vessel invasion into a normally bloodless cornea. This is why oxygen through a lens is measured so carefully. Two researchers, Brian Holden and George Mertz, back in 1984, worked out how much oxygen a lens must pass to keep the cornea safe. One threshold for daytime wear, a much higher one for sleeping in them. Later scientists argued that overnight number should be set even higher still. The conversation is still going. But the lesson is simple and kind. The gentler your lenses are with oxygen, the safer that empty window stays. And modern lenses that breathe well can even let those early, unwelcome vessels quietly retreat. Now, one last gift from all this emptiness, and it might be the most moving of all. Because the cornea has no blood traffic running through it, the immune system barely visits. Your immune cells travel in the blood, and there's almost no blood here for them to ride in on. So the cornea sits in a kind of quiet, unguarded corner of your body. And that quiet corner turns out to be a mercy. When someone's cornea is damaged or clouded beyond repair, a surgeon can take a cornea from a stranger, a donor, and sew it into place. That procedure has a plain name, keratoplasty, just a cornea transplant. And here is the wonder. With most organ transplants, the body fights the stranger's tissue fiercely, and doctors battle to stop it. But because the immune system barely patrols the cornea, a donated one is almost never rejected. A piece of a stranger's eye, carried in their tears not so long ago, can become the window you see the world through. And it is welcomed, precisely because that seat was left empty from the very start. The emptiness that keeps the light clean also keeps the peace. So think for a moment about what your next blink really is. A thin wash of tears sweeping across the front of your eye, a fresh sip of oxygen pulled quietly from the air. Two supplies front and back, feeding one bloodless, transparent window that has to stay empty to keep working. All of it silent, all of it constant, all of it just so you can keep seeing. Makes you wonder, how many quiet miracles are running inside you right now that you will never feel? If one small thing about your own body has ever stopped you in your tracks like this, it would be lovely to hear it in a line below. But for now, just blink softly. You have just watered a living window, so it can keep letting the whole world in.